I returned from my mother's bedside and found my wife locked in our basement. Our daughter, I pulled into my driveway after 2 exhausting weeks away, still shaking off the red-eye flight from Vancouver. My mother had suffered a stroke, and I'd spent every hour by her bedside through the worst of it. She was stable now, thank God, but I was desperate to get home to my wife, Margaret. She has early-onset Alzheimer's, and 2 weeks apart felt like an eternity. The house was dark when I arrived. That struck me as odd. It was only 8 in the evening, and Margaret always kept the living room lights on. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk, trudged to the front door, and fumbled for my keys. That's when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thumping sound coming from somewhere inside the house. My heart stopped. The sound was desperate, uneven, like someone trying to call for help. I jammed the key into the lock and shoved the door open. The noise grew louder. Someone was banging, hard, on something, and I could hear a weak, muffled voice crying out from below, from the basement. I dropped my suitcase and ran to the basement door. It was locked from the outside, sealed shut with a heavy-duty padlock I'd never seen before. The banging grew frantic now, the voice hoarse and trembling. Margaret. I shouted, panic rising in my throat as I searched for something, anything, to break the lock. A faint cry came from the other side. Thomas? It was her. I sprinted to the garage, grabbed a crowbar, and smashed that lock off in 3 desperate swings. The door swung open, and a smell hit me so hard I nearly doubled over. Urine, sweat, and something sour that clung to the air. I flicked on the light. Margaret was at the bottom of the stairs, filthy, trembling. Her nightgown was torn and stained. Her face was hollow, her lips cracked and bleeding. She looked up at me, eyes wide with confusion and terror, like she wasn't sure I was real. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Is that really you?" I was down those stairs in seconds, scooping her into my arms. She felt weightless, fragile. My mind raced. How long had she been down here? How long without food or water? "I'm here, sweetheart," I whispered, holding her close. "I've got you." I carried her upstairs and laid her on the couch, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. As I gave our address to the dispatcher, I looked around, and that's when I noticed it. The house looked different. Furniture had been rearranged. Boxes were stacked in corners I didn't recognize. Margaret's pill organizer, the one I set up for her every week, was gone from the counter. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They rushed to Margaret, checking her vitals. Dehydrated, malnourished, early signs of hypothermia. Even though it was September, one of them looked up. "Sir, when was the last time you saw your wife?" I swallowed hard. 2 weeks ago. I left her with our daughter. Jennifer was supposed to stay with her while I was in Vancouver. My mother had a stroke, and my voice broke. Jennifer did this? The paramedic exchanged a glance with his partner, but didn't answer. They loaded Margaret onto a stretcher, and I rode with her in the ambulance, holding her cold, frail hand. I kept whispering that she was safe now, that I was sorry. So sorry I'd left her. At St. Michael's Hospital, they admitted her immediately. A nurse pulled me aside as doctors worked to stabilize her. "Mr. Holloway," she said softly, "has your wife been locked in that basement the entire 2 weeks you were away?" The question hit me like a freight train. 14 days. 14 days in the dark. I don't know. I managed to whisper, "I just found her like that." An hour later, a police officer arrived. Detective Morrison from Toronto Police's Elder Abuse Unit. Yes, apparently there's an entire unit dedicated to cases like this. I sat in the hospital waiting room and told him everything. "My name's Thomas Holloway. I'm 65, retired from civil engineering. My wife, Margaret, is 63. She was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago. It's been progressing slowly. She still knows who I am, who our daughter is. She just gets confused sometimes, forgets where she put things, loses track of time." I took a shaky breath before continuing. "Our daughter, Jennifer, is 38. She's a CPA at a mid-sized firm downtown. She's been married to Kyle for 3 years. Kyle calls himself a business consultant, but I've never been sure what that means. He's always talking about cryptocurrency, NFTs, passive income. I've never liked him much, if I'm honest. But Jennifer seemed happy, and that's what mattered. I rubbed my hands together, still trembling. 2 weeks ago, my mother had a stroke in Vancouver. My sister called in a panic at 3 in the morning. I booked the first flight out. Jennifer offered to stay with Margaret while I was gone. She said, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of Mom. You just focus on Grandma." I looked down at the floor, my voice barely a whisper. I believed her. I was grateful, relieved, even when Jennifer offered to stay with her mother while I was away. She knew Margaret's routines by heart. She knew where all her medications were, how to calm her when confusion or sundowning set in. I trusted her completely. From Vancouver, I called every day. During the first week, Jennifer always answered. "Mom's fine, Dad," she'd say. "We're watching her favorite shows. I'm making sure she eats. Don't worry." But during the second week, my calls started going to voicemail. She began texting instead. "Sorry, busy with Mom. She's good. Call you later." But she never did. I tried calling Margaret's phone, but it went straight to voicemail too. I told myself it was fine. Jennifer had everything under control. My mother needed me, and I stayed focused on her recovery. Detective Morrison listened carefully as I explained all of this, jotting notes in his small black notebook. Then he asked a question that made my blood run cold. "Mr. Holloway, during those 2 weeks, did you give your daughter power of attorney over your wife's affairs?" "No," I said instantly. "Absolutely not." "Did your wife sign any documents that you know of?" "Not that I'm aware of." "Why?" He closed his notebook slowly. "We'll need to investigate further. But, Mr. Holloway, this appears to be more than just neglect. We'll be in touch." Margaret stayed in the hospital for 3 days. They rehydrated her, treated her for malnutrition and exposure, and ran a battery of tests. She kept asking the same heartbreaking question over and over. "Where's Jenny?" "She was just here. She was making me lunch." "No, sweetheart, she wasn't." On the second day, while Margaret was sleeping, I went back home. I needed to understand what had really happened. What I found made me physically ill. The basement door had been padlocked from the outside. There was a bucket in the corner, her makeshift toilet. A thin blanket lay on the cold concrete floor. No food, no water. The light bulb had been removed from the socket. My wife, the woman who sometimes forgot what day it was but still laughed at my jokes, still cheered for Blue Jays, had been locked in total darkness for 2 weeks. Upstairs, the horror deepened. Jennifer's laptop was still open on the kitchen table, her password conveniently saved. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I went through it. What I found was methodical, calculated, evil. Scanned documents, power of attorney papers bearing Margaret's shaky signature, real estate and bank statements, and a folder labeled investment opportunity, Kyle's fund. I sat there for over an hour, my hands trembling so badly I could barely click the mouse. Here's what they'd done. During my first week in Vancouver, Jennifer took Margaret to a notary's office in Scarborough, not our family lawyer. There, she had her mother sign the POA documents, exploiting her Alzheimer's confusion by telling her it was just paperwork for Dad. The notary apparently didn't ask many questions. Margaret's signature was shaky but recognizable. With that power of attorney, Jennifer gained full access to our finances. She withdrew $75,000 from our savings, the money we'd carefully set aside for Margaret's future care, and then opened a home equity line of credit against our fully paid-off house for another $100,000. Our home in Leslieville had been mortgage-free for 20 years. Now we owed the bank $100,000. All of that money, $175,000 in total, had been transferred to something called Thornhill Capital Management. 3 clicks later, I discovered Thornhill Capital was Kyle's company, a numbered corporation registered just 6 months earlier. The listed business? Cryptocurrency investment and blockchain consulting. In other words, it was a scam, a front for his so-called business ventures. And then came the part that made me physically sick. They couldn't let Margaret talk to me. If she'd picked up the phone, she would have told me something was wrong. Even in her confusion, she'd have known. So they needed to silence her. Their solution? Lock her in the basement. I found a text thread between Jennifer and Kyle from day 3. Kyle, she keeps crying for your dad. This isn't going to work. Jennifer, she'll forget. Give it another day. The confusion helps. Kyle, what if someone checks on her? Jennifer, who? Dad's in Vancouver. Mom's friends haven't visited in months. We're fine. They planned it. Coldly. Rationally. They'd knowingly locked a confused, vulnerable woman in a basement so they could steal her life savings. I called Detective Morrison immediately. He came to the house with 2 officers. I showed them everything. The laptop, the documents, the texts, and the state of the basement. Mr. Holloway, Morrison said carefully, this is elder abuse, financial exploitation, and unlawful confinement. We'll need your wife's statement when she's strong enough, but we already have more than enough to press charges. Where's my daughter now? I asked. We don't know yet. Do you have an address for her? I did. Jennifer and Kyle lived in a condo in Liberty Village, about 20 minutes away. Within an hour, officers were dispatched. They weren't there, but what the officers found inside that condo made everything even worse. The place was nearly empty. Furniture gone. Closets cleared out. But in the trash, they found what the couple had overlooked. Bank statements, paperwork for one-way tickets to Portugal, and a printed email from a property management company in Lisbon confirming a 6-month rental. They'd been planning to run, take the money, and disappear to a country with no extradition treaty for financial crimes. But they'd left too much behind, and they'd underestimated one thing: my early return. My mother's recovery had been faster than expected, so I came home 3 days earlier than planned. If I hadn't, Margaret might have died in that basement. Jennifer and Kyle would have discovered her body, played the devastated daughter, and been on a plane to Lisbon before anyone ever asked questions. Detective Morrison didn't sugarcoat it. Your early return saved your wife's life. That realization broke me. The little girl I taught to ride a bike, the one who cried when her goldfish died at 7, had grown into a woman capable of letting her mother die for money. I couldn't process it. The manhunt began. Within 48 hours, Toronto police issued warrants for Jennifer and Kyle. Their faces were on every news channel. Daughter and son-in-law wanted an elder abuse case. The media went wild. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, reporters, neighbors, old co-workers. But I ignored it all. My focus was Margaret. She came home on the 4th day, frail but healing. Mentally, though, she was somewhere else. Is Jenny coming for dinner? She'd ask softly. No. Sweetheart, I'd tell her. Not tonight. Did I do something wrong? Why won't you visit? How you explain to someone with Alzheimer's that their daughter is a monster? That the person she raised, loved, and trusted had locked her in a basement to steal from her? You don't. You just hold her hand and say, Jenny's busy right now, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. On the 6th day, Jennifer and Kyle were arrested at Pearson Airport. They were trying to board a flight to London, their first stop before heading to Portugal. Border services flagged them immediately. Detective Morrison called me within the hour. We've got them, he said. They're in custody. I felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. The charges came down hard. 2 counts of elder abuse. 2 counts of financial exploitation of a vulnerable person. 2 counts of unlawful confinement. 2 counts of fraud over $5,000. And 1 count of forgery related to the POA documents. Kyle faced even more charges. His investment fund turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. Money from at least 30 other investors, most of them elderly, lured him by promises of 40% returns on crypto trades that never happened. He'd been moving money around, paying old investors with new ones. Classic fraud. A week later, I met with the Crown Attorney, Patricia Chun. Sharp woman. Focused. She laid it all out for me. Mr. Holloway, this is one of the most egregious elder abuse cases I've seen in my career, she said. The premeditation, the exploitation of your wife's condition, The financial devastation. It's all severe. We're pushing for the maximum sentence. How long? I asked. For Jennifer, 8 to 12 years. For Kyle, 10 to 15 because of the additional fraud charges. And the money? I asked quietly. Patricia's expression softened. That's going to be harder. Patricia said quietly, Kyle's fund is bankrupt. The money's gone. Spent moved offshore or used to pay early investors to keep the scheme running. We'll pursue restitution orders. But you need to be realistic about recovery. In other words, our $175,000 was gone. Our savings, our home equity, vanished into Kyle's crypto scam. Then came the question that had been haunting me. Did she know? Jennifer, I asked, did she know what Kyle was doing was fraud? Patricia opened the evidence file. Based on the emails and texts we recovered, yes, she knew. She helped him recruit investors, including 2 of her co-workers from her accounting firm. She even created fake financial statements for the fund. She wasn't just involved. Thomas, she was an active participant. My daughter wasn't a victim of her husband's scheme. She was a co-conspirator. The bail hearing was brutal. Jennifer's lawyer argued for release. No criminal record. Strong ties to the community. Low flight risk despite the Portugal plan. The Crown disagreed. They said she was a clear flight risk, capable of destroying evidence, and a danger to Margaret. The judge sided with the Crown. Bail denied. Jennifer and Kyle would remain in custody at the Toronto South Detention Center until trial. I attended that hearing. I sat in the back row and watched my daughter, in an orange jumpsuit, plead with the judge for release. She cried. She apologized. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. When she saw me, she mouthed, Dad, please. I stood up and walked out. I couldn't look at her. The criminal case moved forward, but I wasn't content to wait for justice from the courts alone. I hired a lawyer, Christopher Walsh, a partner at a firm specializing in elder law and estate litigation. His advice was clear. Thomas, you have ground for a civil suit. Sue them for everything they took, plus damages for what they put Margaret through. Even if they don't have assets now, they might in the future. Inheritance, earnings, property. Lock it down. 2 weeks later, I filed the suit. Jennifer Holloway and Kyle Morrison, defendants. Claims: financial exploitation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty. Damages sought: $175,000 in stolen funds plus $200,000 from Margaret's suffering. But I wasn't done. I contacted the College of CPAs of Ontario. Jennifer had used her credentials as an accountant to give Kyle's scam legitimacy. Her co-workers had trusted her professional judgment. She had violated every ethical standard of her profession. I filed a formal complaint. Within a month, her CPA license was suspended pending trial. If convicted, she'd be permanently disbarred, never able to work as an accountant again. That should have felt satisfying. It didn't. It just felt necessary. The following months were a blur. Margaret's Alzheimer's worsened. Stress accelerates cognitive decline, her neurologist said. She stopped asking about Jennifer, which somehow hurt more than the questions. It was as if her mind had erased her daughter to protect itself. I hired a full-time caregiver to help with Margaret while I managed the legal mess. The bills were piling up: medical expenses, legal fees, the mortgage on a home equity line we never wanted. We were drowning financially. The people responsible were sitting in jail, awaiting trial. The preliminary hearing came in January, 5 months after I found Margaret in that basement. I testified about discovering the documents, the betrayal, everything. Jennifer's lawyer tried to portray her as a victim too, manipulated by Kyle, struggling financially, suffering from mental health issues. It was nonsense, and the judge saw through it. Ms. Holloway, the judge said, you are a trained accountant. You understood exactly what you were doing. You exploited your mother's cognitive vulnerability for financial gain. There is no mitigating factor that excuses that. The case was bound over for trial, set for June, 8 months after the nightmare began. But before the trial, something unexpected happened. Kyle's lawyer approached the Crown with a deal. Kyle would plead guilty to all charges and testify against Jennifer in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claimed Jennifer was the mastermind, that she planned everything and he'd just gone along. It was a coward's move, throwing his wife under the bus to save himself. But Patricia called me to discuss it. If Kyle testifies, we have an airtight case against Jennifer, she said. His cooperation combined with the evidence guarantees a conviction and a strong sentence. Will he serve time? I asked. Yes. We're offering 8 years, with parole eligibility after serving 2/3. He'll be in prison for at least 5 years, realistically longer. And Jennifer? Without his testimony, we risk a hung jury. With it, we'll push for the maximum, 12 years. I thought about Margaret, about those 14 days in the basement, about the life savings we'd lost, the trust, the peace. Take the deal, I said. Kyle pleaded guilty in February. His sentencing was brief. He expressed remorse, though I'm sure his lawyer wrote every word. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Morrison, you participated in a scheme that targeted vulnerable elderly individuals, including your own mother-in-law. You prioritized profit over human dignity. 8 years in federal prison. 1 down. Jennifer's trial began in June. It lasted 3 weeks. The Crown presented everything. The fraudulent power of attorney, the bank transfers, the basement, the texts about Portugal. Then came the hardest moment, Margaret's testimony. Watching her, confused, frightened, trying to explain what had happened, she kept losing her place, forgetting details, asking if she could go home. Jennifer's lawyer tried to use that confusion to suggest she wasn't credible. But then the Crown played the video, the footage from the day police entered the basement. That dark, cold space, the bucket, the thin blanket, the scratches on the door where Margaret had tried to claw her way out. The courtroom fell silent. 2 jurors were crying. Kyle testified next. He described everything, how Jennifer had come up with a plan, researched POA laws, found a notary who wouldn't ask questions, and timed everything around my trip to Vancouver. It was all her idea, he said. I just did what she told me. Even if it was self-serving, the evidence supported it. Jennifer's laptop showed searches about elder exploitation and countries without extradition weeks before Margaret's stroke. She had planned this. When Jennifer took the stand, it was a disaster. She claimed Kyle manipulated her, that she never meant to hurt anyone. The Crown destroyed that narrative. Ms. Holloway, the prosecutor, said, "You texted your husband. She'll forget. Give it another day. The confusion helps. You were referring to your mother. What were you hoping she'd forget?" Silence. Ms. Holloway, you locked your mother in the basement without food or water for 14 days. You stole her savings. You planned to flee the country. And you want this court to believe you never meant to hurt anyone. Jennifer broke down crying. The jury didn't flinch. Deliberations took 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing 2 months later, I submitted a 5-page victim impact statement describing what this had done to Margaret, to me, to our lives. Her neurologist submitted a letter explaining how the trauma had worsened her Alzheimer's. The judge read everything, then looked at Jennifer. Ms. Holloway, you are an educated, intelligent woman. You exploited your mother's vulnerability without conscience. You betrayed her trust and every standard of decency. This court sees no mitigating factors. Jennifer Holloway, you are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. I exhaled. It was over, but not really. The civil suit settled a month later. Jennifer and Kyle were jointly liable for $375,000. The court placed liens on any future assets or inheritance, though realistically, we'll never see that money. The criminal restitution order said they owe us $175,000 plus interest. Again, good luck collecting. We refinanced the home equity loan into our mortgage. After 20 years without debt, we have monthly payments again, and we'll be paying for the rest of our lives. Margaret's care costs are rising as her Alzheimer's advances. Insurance helps, but not enough. I'll probably have to sell the house soon to afford memory care. Jennifer is at Grand Valley Institution for Women, west of Toronto. She'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. Kyle is at Joyceville near Kingston. He can apply for parole in 5. I haven't visited. I won't. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a daughter anymore. People ask if I regret pressing charges, if I think 12 years was too harsh, if I should have tried to work it out as a family. Here's what I tell them. Jennifer locked her confused, terrified mother in a basement for 2 weeks. She stole everything we'd saved from Margaret's final years. She planned to let her die and flee the country with the money. She did it knowingly, calculatedly, without conscience. 12 years isn't too harsh. It's mercy. Margaret doesn't remember where Jennifer is. Sometimes she still asks. I tell her Jennifer's away for work. It's easier than explaining the truth to someone who won't remember it anyway. Last month, Marta forgot who I was. For the first time, she looked at me and asked who I was and what I was doing in her house. It only lasted an hour before she recognized me again. But I know what's coming. The final stage. Jennifer didn't just steal our money. She stole our time. Those 2 weeks we could have spent together were replaced with trauma, fear, and loss. So no, I don't regret the 12 years. I'd do it again. Justice isn't revenge. It's accountability. It's the truth made visible. Some things are unforgivable. My daughter learned that the hard way. I hope everyone hearing this story learns it the easy way. Your family's trust is sacred. Break it. And don't be surprised when the consequences break you in return. As for me and Margaret, we're still here, still fighting, still together. That's more than Jennifer wanted for us, and more than she'll have for the next 12 years. And honestly, that's the only justice that matters. Thanks for listening to the end. I'll see you in the next story where we'll keep sharing these truths that hurt but that need told. Until the next story.